Continuing, I'm going to start off with an earthquake problem, even though I've gone over this to make sure that you guys have a clue what you're doing. So in December 2004, an earthquake with magnitude 9.3 on the Richter scale hit off the northwest coast of Sumatra. The diagram shows the magnitude of an earthquake that hit Sumatra in March 2005. The formula log of the intensity of the initial one divided by the intensity of the second one is equal to the magnitude of the first one minus the magnitude of the second one. Compares the intensity levels of earthquakes where I is the intensity level determined by a seismograph, and M is the magnitude on a Richter scale. How many times more intense was the December earthquake than the March earthquake? Now, what that means is, if you're looking at this formula, whenever it's asking for how much more intense it is, I don't know the flashlight. Absolutely. How much more intense is this lovely little earthquake than the previous one? What are you doing is you are locating your lovely little I1 over I2 ratio. Okay, whenever I say ratio, what does that mean? A ratio is a fraction. That is a fraction. That is a ratio. So what you're trying to do is solve this thing for I1 over I2. Because I1 divided by I2 tells you how many times stronger a lovely little hurricane, earthquake, tornado, anything stronger is. Does that make sense? Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to plug and chug. So what was the first initial amount? 9.3. So if we're on the Richter scale, I have log of the intensity of 1 over the intensity of 2 of 9.3, which is the first magnitude. And then what's the second magnitude? Well, the second magnitude is right here. That's M2, which is going to be 8.7. So if I take 8.7 and subtract it from 9.3, how much are you left with? Okay, that's how much you're left with. Now I need to solve for I sub 1 over I sub 2, which is the ratio of the comparison. So how do I get rid of this? I need to write it as an exponential. So how do I write this as an exponential? This base is understood to be a 10. So 10 to the 0.6 is equal to I1 over I2, which means 10 to the 0.6 power is 3.98, which means it's approximately 4 times greater. Do we all understand that? Now, going on to the next earthquake problem. In 1995, an earthquake in Mexico registered 8 on the Richter scale. In 2001, an earthquake of magnitude 6.8 shook Washington State. How many times more intense was the 95 earthquake in Mexico than the 2001 earthquake in Washington State? Well, what do I need to know? I need to know what it was in Mexico, which was an 8, and then I need to know what it was in Washington, which was a lovely 6.8, correct? That's what I need to pull out of there. So I'm going to have log base 10, because it's understood to be there, of M1 minus M2. So this is log I1 over I2 is equal to, what's my first one? 8 minus 6.8. If I have $8 and I pay somebody $6.80, how much money do I have left? 120. So I have log of I1 over I2 is equal to 1.2. Now how do I write this as an exponential? What's my base?
10.
Why is it a 10 when it's not there?
It's understood to be there.
It's understood to be there. So 10 raised to the look across the equal sign, 1.2 is equal to I1 over I2. When you calculate that, what do you get? Anybody have a calculator on right now? What is it? 15.8 is what I1 over I2 is equal to, which is approximately 16 times larger. So the impact in Mexico was 16 times larger than what it was in Washington State. Do we all understand that, yay or nay? Now, if you look on tonight's worksheet that I gave you last night, this is exactly like problems 13 through 16, correct? This is exactly like problems 13 through 16. Any questions over those now? Okay, now let's look at these pH problems. The pH problems I'm talking about are 29 through 32. For each pH given, find the concentration of hydrogen ions H+. In other words, H+ represents your positive hydrogen ions. Do we understand that? Yay or nay? Okay? You don't have to understand the science behind it to be able to solve the math behind it. Use the formula that pH is equal to negative log of H plus H to the positive. Now, if you look at this, folks, this is actually which number on tonight's homework?
Number 30.
This is actually number 30. Okay? The directions say for each pH given. For each pH given. So where does 4.6 go?
Where the pH is.
Where the pH is. So if I have this formula, what am I solving for here?
Log.
I am solving for 4.6 goes in for the pH. The negative log stays. What I'm solving for is this lovely little H+. In other words, I need to find that all by its lonesome. So what do I need to get rid of first?
The negative log.
The negative. How do I get rid of the negative?
Divide.
Divide both sides by -1. So I have negative 4.6 is equal to log of H+. Now, do we like logs? No. What does our brain work in?
Exponentials.
So how do I write this as an exponential? What's the base?
4. Negative 4.
What's the base of that log?
10.
The base of the log is 10. So I'm going to have 10, look across the equal sign,
Make it up to negative 4.
to the negative 4.6 is equal to H+. So if I bring out my calculator here, and I calculate this, and I put in here 10 caret to the negative 4.6, what does that give me? 0.000025, right? Okay? So 4 zeros. Now, what it wants you to do is put this in scientific notation. Okay, what this wants you to do is put it in scientific notation. In other words, I'm going to move this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units. So I'm going to have 2.5. Why am I moving it 5 units and not 4 units?
Because you have to have 1 in front of it.
Because you have to have a number between 1 and less than 10. It can't be 10, it has to be less than 10. So I moved that 5 times, and it's a really small number, so it's -5. Okay? So that is the answer to this problem, and it says to find the concentration. Now what this means is it's a really, really, really small number of a concentration of that hydrogen ion. Make sense?
How do you know when you look at that?
Because I need a number between 1 and 10, less than 10. A number between 1 and 9 that is less than 10. Because if I move it one time, it's still a decimal. Move it another time, still a decimal, another decimal, decimal. Now, it's 2.5 is a number between 1 and 10. You move it until you get a number between 1 and 10. Okay? Let's do it again. This is book number, problem number 45 out of your book. Find the concentration level of hydrogen ions in seawater. In other words, how much hydrogen ions is in your seawater? Okay? If the pH level of the seawater is 8.5. Well, now they're giving it to you in a lovely little story problem. Does this change anything?
No.
No. So what this means is I still have pH is equal to negative log of the positive hydrogen ions. Now what's my pH?
8.5.
8.5. And what am I solving for?
The H.
The H plus, which represents hydrogen ions. So what do I get rid of?
The negative.
I get rid of the negative, so I'm going to divide both sides by -1. That's gone, and I have negative 8.5 is equal to log of H plus. Now, does our brain think in logs?
No.
So what do I do? Write this as an exponential. So what does that mean I do? My base is 10, so 10 raised to, look across the equal sign, negative 8.5 is equal to H plus. So if I go back to my calculator, and I hit 10 caret negative 8.5 and hit enter, what does this mean? It's already in scientific notation. In other words, it's 3.16 e to the negative 9. In other words, 3.16 times 10 to the negative 9 is equal to my H positive. In other words, it is such a small amount of hydrogen ions that they have to write it in scientific notation. Do we understand that? Okay, now today I'm giving you the rest of the period to work on this worksheet and to get it 100% done. Okay? I want to take a quiz in here. If you think you're ready for the quiz today after you get your homework done because you understand it, by all means, ask me and I'll send you the quiz. If you want to wait until tomorrow, there are 7 questions on that quiz, so you may want to wait until tomorrow to do that. Any questions over what I just said? Okay? I've taught you every bit of this lovely little worksheet. Now, I will go over one concept here. I will do one of the problems 36 through 38. Which one do you want me to do? 37? So if I do 37 off your worksheet, y is equal to 2 log base 5 of x. Now it says find the domain and the range of the function. Well, do our brains work better in exponentials or logarithms?
Exponentials.
Exponentials. So this is going to be, if I write this as an exponential, what? 5 to the y is equal to what?
What is x?
Oh, wait, the 2 do to it?
That's stretches it, isn't it?
Stretches it, it does. Okay, what's the parent function? How do I get rid of that 2?
What?
Divided by. So I have 1/2 y is equal to log base 5 of x. So now how do I write that? What do you mean, why don't I have the 5 there? Because the 2 is throwing you guys off. You don't know what to do with it exponentially. So what we have to do is figure out how do we get rid of it. You said that it was a stretch for the log, right? So if the opposite of a stretch would be a compressed, so the opposite of a log would be a exponential. So if it's a stretch for a log, it's going to be a compression for a exponential. Do we understand that? The only way we can get an exponential compression is by multiplying by a fraction, right? Do we understand that? So now what we're going to have, there's my power, so 5 to the 1/2 y is equal to x. In other words, 5 to the 1/2 x is equal to my level of y. That's my exponential function. Now, the only reason I showed you that is because if you want to graph something, you have to be able to graph an exponential, because you can't graph the log without using the graphing calculator, can you? The only way you can graph a log is by graphing the exponential first by hand. Do we all understand that? So if I start plugging in values here, if I plug in -2 there, that's going to give me 1/2 times -2, which is going to be -1. Well, what is 5 to the -1 power? 1/5, right? Over here, 1/2 times -1 is going to be -1/2. Well, if I put 5 to the -1/2, what is that? We got it? Five to the -1/2 is what? Well, maybe what I should let you guys do is we could have it in the audience. What what's happening to 36? Which direction is it moving? Up, down, left, right. It's moving down 2 units. What's happening to number 37? It's moving up. No, it's not moving up. It's a stretch, right? So if we're looking at 36, my parent function of the log of x looks like that. Do we understand that? That's what it looks like. So for 36, I'm taking this function and what am I doing to it? Moving the whole thing down 2 units. Has my domain changed?
No.
What is my domain? Where does it start? As I'm on my lovely little approaching, do I have any y values yet? Nope, I keep going over here. Do I have any y values yet? Nope, I hit the x-axis. Do I have any y values? It gets closer and closer and closer, right? So I have for 36, my domain is x has to be what? Greater than 0. That's my domain. In my range, I'm approaching this from the bottom. So as I'm walking, do I have a corresponding x value here? Yep. How about now? Yep. How about now? Yep. How about now? Yep. Y is an element of the reals. Do I have an asymptote here? What's my asymptote? The y-axis. What is that equation?
0.
0 is a number. Y equals 0 is horizontal. X equals 0 is vertical. Okay, can we understand 36? 37. 37 is going to be y is equal to 2 log of x. Well, what's happening to that? If that's log of x over there, what's happening to this? It's just going to make it go higher, right? It just makes it go up higher, the arch of it. So my question to you, has my domain changed? As I am approaching this and going from left to right, I have no corresponding y's. I have no corresponding y's. Where do I land into the corresponding y's? After 0. So my domain has to be what? Greater than 0. What's my range?
Y is an element of the reals, I'm guessing.
Because if I'm right here, this gets really, 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 really close to the y-axis, right? So what's happening? I have one. I have one. I have one. So I have a corresponding x every time, don't I? So it's y is an element of the reals. Okay, what's my asymptote?
X equals 0.
It's still your vertical asymptote. It's still going to be your y-axis, which is x is 0. Now what's happening to 38? What's happening to 38?
It's going left 1.
Okay, so what's happening is, here's my regular logarithmic function. What's happening now? My regular logarithmic function goes to the point 1, 0. What's happening to this? It moves it to the left. So since my asymptote was x equals 0, what's my asymptote now? If my asymptote was the x-axis, now what's my asymptote? It's getting really close to what value? What value? -1. So my asymptote now moved to the left to be x equals -1, right? Now what's my domain? Since my asymptote moved, now my domain's going to move. So when do I start to get a y value? After -1. So x has to be greater than or equal to -1. Now what about my range? Has my range changed on this? Has it? Well, here I am. I'm walking. Do you have to see corresponding x value? I do. So has my range changed? No, it's still y is an element of the reals. Okay, one more that's not on there. What happens, not plus, minus. What happens there?
Becomes x bigger
Where's it go?
Right.
Goes to the right 10. So if it was at the point, 1, 0, where is that going to move it to?
Right 10.
I have to go all the way, 10 units. So what changes is my x. So if this is the point 1, 0, I have to go 10 units from that. So what's going to be my next point? 11, 0. Okay, so that point is going to give me right here. So what is it going to get really close to? We know it touches at 11, so where's it going to get really close to?
12.
Where? So my asymptote is going to be what here? X equals 10, which means if my asymptote moves, what's going to happen to my domain? Not equal to it, because remember that's my asymptote. Asymptote means it cannot cross it. But it has to be greater than 10. Now what about my domain, my range?
Why is it open over the rails?
It's still wide over the reals because that doesn't change. Do we understand the domain and range stuff in the asymptotes a little bit better now? I know I said I was only going to do like one of them, but you guys clearly needed more on it. Now I'll be available. I'm going to be at my desk grading for the rest of the period. If you need help with this, please ask. You need to make sure that you understand how to do this, because I'm going to tell you straight up right now. You will have a problem like 1 through 6 tomorrow. You will have a problem like 7 through 12. You will have an earthquake problem. You will have problems like 9 through 22 and 36 through 38. And you will also have problems like 29 through 32. When it says to find the inverse, what does that mean? What's the inverse of a log?
An exponential.
An exponential. Right? Any questions? Okay, the rest of the time is yours.